America's game. Now, stop humming this here, everything done changed. That warp tool make you open your brain. Eric Vanek is here, so remember the name. He got the waiver wire for the week. Tell you who to start and who to give a seat. Dropping the podcast every week. You know the knowledge is elite. After the show, we gon' hold a Lombardi. Celebrating like we throwing a party. This the blueprint and I know they gon' copy. Top Harmon intros always go the hardest. Cause this is America's game.
Hey everybody, welcome back to America's Game, episode number 39. I am your host, Eric Vanek, and you can find me on Twitter at Eric Vanek NFL. And this week I am joined by special guest, Matt Bruening, and Matt is the co-founder of CampusToCanton.com. If you haven't been there yet, check it out. One of the best resources for Devy college stuff in the game, in my opinion. He's also a part of Devy Debate, the Roundtable FF, and all kinds of other good stuff. Matt, how you doing, man? It's been a while.
It has been. It's been about a year. I'm excited to jump on with you and talk some NFL. Excited to be here. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. And yeah, I appreciate all the wonderful things you said about Campus to Canton. I 100% agree with you, though my take is probably a little bit more biased than most. So,
right. Hey, whenever I got a Devy draft or something going on, that's the first place I go to go get all my rankings and all that stuff. So it's definitely the place to go for me.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, hell yeah. Matt's also going to be joining us on our NFL draft stream. So when you're hearing this, it'll be draft day tomorrow. We're recording this on Wednesday night, so one more day until the draft. Matt will be joining us on Friday night, so if you guys want to check out Matt for rounds 2 and 3, come join us on that night as well. We'll be doing all 3 days, so it's going to be a lot of fun. So looking forward to that. Man, it is draft day, man. I'm excited. It's like ready, opening a Christmas present.
It really is. It's I don't even know how. I guess you hear people say it all the time, but it really is like it's one of the very few days in the NFL season where like all fans and every team is truly involved. Because like even with as the season opens, like some of us, both of us being Browns fans, like for a very long time, we weren't necessarily really believing when the season kicked off we had a chance to do something. Now, the last couple of years that has changed, but like every draft year was something like we were always excited. Okay, who are we going to get now? Who's going to be our quarterback? And we're finally going to figure it out. So yeah, it's always a lot of fun. It's fun watching fans react too. I was actually just watching something on Twitter the other day. Bills fans getting upset when they drafted Josh Allen. And I bet now if they go back there, they'd be pretty happy that they drafted Josh Allen. So it's just a lot of fun to see all that stuff. It's one of the best times of the year, in my opinion.
Or Browns fans going absolutely nuts when they drafted Johnny Manziel.
Oh, yeah.
I was one of those. Yep,
so was I. Hey, so was I. I remember I was very into college football at that time, too, and watching him run around the field and make those magic, Money Manziel, making the money happen and magic against Alabama and all this stuff. You're like, oh, this guy's going to light it up in the NFL. And, yeah, that was Browns luck on that one.
Other stuff, yeah.
That's for sure, yeah.
I brought Matt on today. We're just gonna go through all the prospects, quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends. If we get to tight ends, just for fantasy football, kind of talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses of these guys, some player comps, and just kind of what Matt has seen from these guys, what he thinks they're going to be in the NFL. So we're going to start it off here first with the quarterback position, obviously. First guy is up, Caleb Williams. Strength, he's got really good mobility in the pocket, the ability to create with his feet, ability to create second chance plays when the play breaks down. He's been compared to Patrick Mahomes with his ability to make plays off script. Great arm strength, ability to layer throws, ability to adjust arm angles, throw a touch when needed. Very good in zone read and RPO type schemes where he's run with Lincoln Riley. Ability to run as well. He could probably be a 200 350 yard rusher in the NFL, I would think. Weakness, He's got some ball security issues, holding the ball away from his body. Needs to improve on that. Drops back way too long. Asks his O-line to hold up for longer than 4 seconds, way too much. Needs to be better with his eyes manipulating and can get stuck on his reads from times. Takes too many sacks, which is, obviously the O-line concerns. And then a lot of people always, gave size concerns to Baker Mayfield and players like that, Russell Wilson. But if you look at Baker Mayfield to him, just from the combine, Baker was 6'5", 215 pounds, and Caleb is 6'1", 214. So like barely any size difference there between Baker and Caleb. But Caleb never really gets that, oh, he's too small, thing. So I wonder if that could be a weakness or a concern as well. But some of the player comps, man, that people have given him, obviously the Mahomes comp, just kind of for his off-script ability. I don't think any of the other stuff is, Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. Kyler Murray I've seen, and Aaron Rodgers as well. So what do you think about Caleb?
I mean, I don't want to bring the room down or anything, but like I would almost say at times you could also compare him to Zach Wilson of the New York Jets when you talk about his plays off platform and everything. Like I have no doubt that the competitor in Caleb Williams, I think he just did an interview. I want to say it came out a couple days ago where like he's talking about he felt he should have been the starter as a true freshman at Oklahoma, where he started out with Lincoln Riley, who's better than Spencer Rattler, which is not necessarily untrue.
Right.
Just like what drives him. He is a fierce competitor. He is a guy. I mean, going back to his days, I believe it was even as a middle school quarterback, like his dad putting him through different workouts and everything. Him and his dad very close, running practically his entire life like a business to get to this point. So, like, I think he's going to be fine. I do have a little bit of concern with, you mentioned the sacks and everything. A lot of that, I think the easiest way to put it for people in the fantasy community to understand is like he plays a little bit too much hero ball at times. And that is
Mm-hmm.
I don't like. And it's more even when he cuts out of the clean pockets. Like when it's a clean pocket, he should just stay in. It doesn't need to bail out and then rushes off to his right or left and cuts a field in half, completely eliminates a bunch of receivers on the other side, depending on what the plays are. And I think the reason people compare him to Patrick Mahomes is, like you said, is because they see Patrick Mahomes do that in the NFL. They're running around, behind the line of scrimmage and making magic happen. And for me, it's not that I don't think Caleb can do it. It's just hard for me to believe that he can because we've really only seen Mahomes succeed at doing it. I mean, we've seen quarterbacks try and do that. Johnny Manziel's one of them. Granted, again, Manziel had all the off-field stuff and everything else going on. I don't think Caleb has that, but I just think it's tough to compare a player like that to the arguably the greatest of all time. I mean, what I think Mahomes is going to be when it's all said and done. So I think he's going to be a very good quarterback. I agree with you on the 300 plus yards rushing every year. He can definitely bring you that good legs. Does have a really good arm, and I think throws, I guess where I will say reminds me of Mahomes and kind of Rodgers is it's just effortless. Like he can fling it, 50, 60 yards down the field and looks like he's barely even trying. But I do think there's things that he needs to improve on. I don't know that he's going to end up like I will say like a CJ Stroud, who ended up being so good as a true, I say true freshman. I always got the college stuff in my head. As a rookie in the NFL, right? Like comes out there and it just goes gangbusters. And I'll even admit, I did not expect CJ Stroud to be that good this year.
Right.
I think it may take Caleb a year. I think 2 is probably going to be too much. I think it might take me. I think you could have like an okay rookie season, like maybe finishing in that QB 15-ish range and then really jump up into like that top 10 QB because of just his game and everything. But I do think it's going to take him some time to adjust because I just don't think the hero ball is going to work for him running around. Like I would always joke on all of the college shows that I felt like if you added up all of him running around in the backfield all the time, he'd end up with like 400 yards rushing every game because he would run and drop. It almost reminds me of the people who play Madden who aren't good at like diagnosing defenses and would just keep dropping back like 60 yards and then bombing it right to their player. And it feels like that's what Caleb does at times. I don't think that succeeds in the NFL. So I do think it'll take him a little bit of time. But at the end of the day, he is a special player and he should end up being a top 12 quarterback more often than not.
Yeah, that I have some of the same concerns as you did, and I just don't like. We've talked, even Trevor Lawrence when he came out, he was considered can't miss, all this stuff. He still hasn't really proven it to me that he could, take over games and stuff. And I kind of get a little worried with Caleb maybe being able to do that too. So we'll see. Um, do you have any? I mean, I know we've seen Kyler Murray and his stuff with his dad and stuff in the
Yeah.
past. Do you have any worries about Caleb and his dad? And, he kind of gets the diva moniker a little bit.
I don't because I feel like, and I've mentioned this, I think with I mentioned it with Tom Brady. Actually, we do so I mean, you mentioned our Devy stuff. We do a Devy guide every single year, and we do rankings calls. And we talk about all this stuff. And I remember last year there was a big argument at our company about putting actually Drake May of ahead of Caleb Williams, because there were people on the team who did not like Caleb's attitude, and they felt like it
Right.
came off diva-ish. And my point on that was because, like, they brought up the fact that he was crying after he lost a
Right.
big game and all that other stuff. He's got the paints his fingernails, F off, and all that to the other
Right.
team on there. And my point on that was, but if he was winning all the time, you guys would all love it. And so I
Right.
don't think it's an issue. He doesn't. Would you like it not to be, I guess, is that put offish? Yes, you would, especially when you're talking about your franchise quarterback. But
Mhm.
I mean, I think now that we've gotten to know more about Aaron Rodgers, over the past
Right.
couple
True.
years, there's a little bit different stuff off the field with him, right? But he's still a great player and makes it work. So
Right.
I think Caleb will be fine. I mean, yeah, sure. Like I said, you probably like him to be more like Patrick Mahomes and CJ Stroud, these guys who are like buttoned up, just seem like great people and all that. So I'm not trying to say Caleb's not a great person, but yeah, you'd
Right.
like him to be more like that. But I also kind of you also kind of like a villain, and I think Caleb
Right.
can do that and succeed at doing it. So I don't think it'll
Okay.
be an issue.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, like you mentioned Rodgers, but Rodgers has been in the NFL. He's won a Super Bowl and
Yeah,
multiple
true.
MVPs, and he's done it. Caleb hasn't done anything in the NFL. So that's kind of where I worry that he's coming in as this, I don't want to say entitled, but kind of like this entitled attitude. Oh, I want to own part of the franchise if you
Yeah.
draft me and stuff. I don't even who even knows if that's true, but just stuff like that kind of worries me on Caleb. So I kind of press the brakes on him a little bit, but the talent's there. I mean, he's really good. All right, next quarterback up, Jaden Daniels, quarterback from LSU. His strengths, obviously, his ability to scramble and be electric with the ball in his hands. Attacks every inch of the field vertically and horizontally with a good arm. Placement on downfield throws, 67% clip this past season on throws downfield, 20-plus yards or more. 22 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Extremely hard worker. In the offseason, to learn the offense that he attacks his playbook. LSU head coach Brian Kelly quoted, his work in the offseason was unbelievable. We used to cut off how long players could stay in the building, but had to change our protocols and give players unlimited access because Jaden basically lived there. A lot of starts and experience in his career, so a lot of good stuff there. Weaknesses, slender frame. Obviously, he's always been very tiny. Even when he was at Arizona State, I'm like, how the hell is this guy going to survive with how slender he was? Needs to learn how to slide and get out of bounds. He was compared, I forget who compared him to this, but Johnny Knoxville was their comparison for him, which makes sense. He can't be taking these massive car crash hits every single week. May scramble too much instead of sticking to his second and third reads. Some of the player comps, obviously Lamar Jackson's been one of the hot ones, but I think that's more for his scrambling ability. Yeah. I've seen also Jalen Hurts, probably a smaller version of Jalen Hurts, and Robert Griffin III I thought was a really good one as well. What did you think about Jade, obviously, with this tremendous year that he's coming off of?
Yeah, I mean, he had a worthy Heisman year, even though LSU probably didn't have, you would hope that the team, the player that wins the Heisman is on like the best team in the country. LSU wasn't that, but I think Daniels was by far the best player in college and earned that award. I mean, Daniels has had a very up and down college career. I remember jumping into I think it was his true freshman season was in 2019. Came in as a true freshman playing for Herm Edwards at Arizona State, looking good mostly as a rusher. And everybody was like, we saw flashes of his passing, but he was not a very good passer when he first came into college. And everybody's like, oh, what's going to happen here? Is this kid going to be like the next big thing? COVID comes, not a great year. Junior season, same thing, played all season, but just did not play good, ended up transferring out. And it was funny because people who may not pay that close attention to college, Arizona State's team like wanted him gone. Like when he announced he entered the transfer portal, and this was right when the rules changed and like you could transfer at any point in time, like the players on Arizona State went and ransacked his locker, and there was a video of them talking about his teammates saying he's a bum. Thank God he's gone. He's not good. So like everyone's like, why would your teammates talk about you like that? All that other stuff. So and then obviously goes to LSU and has 2 very good seasons.
Right.
I think out of all the quarterbacks, well, I guess I only think there's 3 quarterbacks likely going in the first round personally.
Okay.
As much as I like Daniels and the talent that is there, especially with the rushing and what he did this year as a deep passer, I think he is the one that would bust out of the 3 that I think will go in the first round. I say that because, obviously, as you mentioned, the frame there is a weakness. He can throw the deep ball, but it is very much like this arcing shot. Like he does not throw anything on a line. He cannot make those sideline throws. So like Felix Sharp, one of the other co-founders at Campus Can, who I immensely respect. I remember talking with him one day about quarterbacks, and he said the true measure of a quarterback's arm strength is when they're standing on the opposite hash and they can fire it to the opposite sideline, like on a dot. And I mean, just a legit piss missile. Jaden Daniels cannot do that. Like, he just does not have that kind of arm strength. Now, again, he has enough to challenge all 3 levels of the field, but he doesn't have that kind of arm strength. I actually think his ball placement on deep throws is actually kind of poor as well. And this is not a shot at Jaden Daniels, but if you go and watch a lot of LSU's film and you really watch it, a lot of times when he's hitting, Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors, more often than not, they're pretty wide open. And you expect at least NFL quarterbacks, Heisman winning quarterbacks, to make that throw. So I am a little worried about him. Who I would comp him to, especially when it comes to his rushing, I would say he's actually more Colin Kaepernick than Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's a special athlete. I don't think it's fair to put anybody in that category.
Right.
So I would say he's more Colin Kaepernick. The other fear I have with Jaden Daniels is if you go back and look at his college career, it was successful again as a rusher, not necessarily a passer until he got Mike Denbrock. And why that might be a big thing is Desmond Ridder, who has not had the success in the NFL, at least from people like I hoped. I did like Desmond Ridder going into the NFL.
Right.
But if you go look at all the quarterbacks he's had in college, it's been these quarterbacks who are really good rushers and can throw the ball. Now, Desmond Ridder, in my opinion, has much better arm strength than Jaden Daniels does. But he just runs a system that helps those guys out. And what I mean by that is also if you go watch LSU's film, Daniels, the same thing I just complained about with Caleb Williams, he runs out of clean pockets a lot. And sometimes my big fear with him is it's after his first read is covered. You'll see him go to his first read and he'll just take off with his legs. In my opinion, you cannot do that in the NFL. You will fail miserably with that. I think he's got the talent to overcome that. You just mentioned his work ethic. That's all it really takes, in my opinion, because he's got the other talent around him in his legs, and I do think he's still a talented passer. So if he's really willing to put in the work when he gets into the NFL, I think he'll get past that. But I have my concerns about him more than I do Williams, and I'll just say Drake May. Like, those are the 3 I believe should be first-round picks and all have a chance to be franchise quarterbacks. He's the one out of those 3 that I have serious concerns about not being able to, like, make it long term. I mean, a player we're both a fan of, you can see his jersey behind me, wrong side. There we go. I think Justin Fields was a 10 times better passer than Jaden Daniels, and also, though, had struggles going through his progressions at times and getting off certain reads. He just got traded as now going to be the backup in Pittsburgh. So I don't want everybody to fall in love with Jaden Daniels because he won a Heisman and had this incredible year at LSU and thinking, oh, he's the next Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's a legitimate quarterback. I think Jaden Daniels has things he needs to improve on.
Yeah, and if, the odds right now are that he's going to go number 2 to Washington, I think, he's got enough weapons there. I think he's one of those guys who has to have the good weapons, the good offensive line around him. The offensive line in Washington is terrible, so they got to fix that. But he's got McLaurin, he's got Dotson. I think that's enough to work with. He's got Eckler and Brian Robinson in the backfield. They signed Zach Ertz, who knows the offense. So I think he has enough weapons there to at least give him a shot. I mean, they got to fix the O-line a little bit. I was never really impressed with Cliff Kingsbury in the NFL, so I don't know what you feel about that, but we'll see how it works out there. I think I'm a little more optimistic than you, just because I think for fantasy wise, because of the rushing upside.
Yeah.
Um, he might not be like the greatest, throwing 40 touchdowns or anything like he did last year, but I think the rushing ability, at least in fantasy, will keep him afloat because back in the day, Tim Tebow was a top 12 quarterback and he couldn't, hit water if he fell out of a boat. So.
Yeah. No, the Cliff Kingsbury thing is going to be a big thing for me as well. That's why I brought up Mike Denbrock, because he was such a good schemer for a quarterback, like I said, like Desmond Ridder, like Jaden Daniels. I mean, look, I get that when he was with Arizona, they won a lot of games. I'm going to go ahead and say a lot of that was Kyler Murray. I mean, dude couldn't get, he is the only coach that I know of that has failed upwards better than anybody else, because he had a below 500 win record in college football. It was like, what was it? I can't remember. I want to say it was 4 or 5 games under 500 at Texas Tech when he got fired and was going to go be the offensive coordinator at USC. And I think realistically, the only reason they hired him at Arizona was to kind of push the let's go get Kyler Murray narrative. And I don't think he's proven anything at the NFL level. So
yeah. So that whole hiring kind of had me a little so we'll see how it works out. He does have some negatives going against him. But yeah, we'll see on that one. Next one up, Drake May. So quarterback, UNC. Strengths, obviously a very strong arm, above average velocity, can make every throw on the field. He can use his ability to alter speeds to deliver with touch and loft when needed. Very good on the move and making throws with accuracy on the move. Very good scrambler to pick up yards on the run. I think he could be like a Daniel Jones type rusher. I mean, could he get 500, 600 yards? I think that's probably the high end, but I think 300 to 400 is probably more realistic. Last 2 seasons, he had rushes of 10 plus yards 56 times, which was only second to Jaden Daniels. So that just shows you some of his scrambling ability. Weaknesses: too many reckless plays throwing the ball. Still needs to learn which throws he should make and shouldn't make. Needs to take better care of the football. Too many panic plays while he getting sacked. He may try to make another play he shouldn't be making, and it makes a catastrophic play. Needs to clean up his fumbles as well. Accuracy needs to improve a little bit. Too many easy throws that went into the dirt. Player comps that we had, for Justin Herbert. I could see maybe a little bit bigger version of Russell Wilson. And another one I saw was Mitchell Trubisky. So what do you think about Drake May?
Yeah, I mean, I love Drake. I mentioned earlier that we had this argument when we did our Devy Guide about him being QB1. I was actually one of the people pushing that, but more because I believe he is a more complete quarterback prospect than Caleb Williams, because he does not bail out of the pocket. Like, he will stay in there. Especially if you go back and look at, I believe he's technically a redshirt freshman in his first season at North Carolina. I mean, there were times that he was standing in the pocket and delivering just frozen ropes right where it needed to be, right as he was just getting, just destroyed, because his offensive line was horrible. I mean, you talk about, for NFL fans, how bad the Washington Commanders offensive line is. The North Carolina Tar Heels was worse than that for the college football side of things. And Drake was still out there making plays. So I think that he really has a chance to be the best out of all of these. I agree with you on the accuracy, and I think a lot of that just comes from he's very inconsistent in his footwork and his mechanics. He doesn't have like that same repeatable delivery that like Caleb has, and I would say even Jaden Daniels has at times. Like, he tends to get into this thing where, and I think a lot of it comes after he's been hit a bunch of times in a game, or he's trying to make a play happen, and like he kind of tries to speed everything up, and his footwork gets a little bit sloppy, and that obviously, in my opinion, leads to the inaccuracies and everything. But can throw from multiple arm angles, can throw all over the field. I think he actually has a stronger arm than Caleb and Jaden Daniels, I'd argue. Outside of probably Michael Penix, has the strongest arm in this class. And what I do love about him is, outside of, as well as Michael Penix, he is the best pocket manipulator in this class. Like, he doesn't just look to bail out of the pocket when the rushers come in. Like, he has no problem stepping up, and if he has to run up the middle to get tough yards or to find that ball and check the ball down. So I think he's got all the talent to be there. Again, it really for me, it's just the inconsistencies with his footwork and his accuracy issues, which I think is something that he can clean up, because it's not like he was passing for like 55% in college.
Right.
He was still accurate. Just in certain moments, he needs to be better about that.
Right. I agree with that. My only concern too is if he does go to New England just doesn't have a lot of picks. I think they just have like all their regular picks. I mean, they need help on the offensive line. Obviously, they need receivers. Are they going to be able to get the weapons around him? So I wouldn't, I wouldn't be opposed to just starting Brissett for like the first half of the season, and let May, come over in week 8 or whatever, whenever their bye week is. So I wouldn't be opposed to if they did that, but we'll see what they do there. I think they need to get some playmakers around him though, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely had a worse season this year, and I think a lot of that can be attributed to not having Josh Downs. It's like that relief valve for him to check down to, with obviously New England doesn't have that. So, yeah, I think it would be really smart of them to try and start, even if they start maybe Brissett the entire year, and then let him go in year 2 as they're able to get some playmakers around him.
Yeah, and then he was missing Devontae Walker for half the season because of all the eligibility crap, and so that didn't help either. All right, next up, J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback from Michigan. Strengths, above average athlete, quick feet. His ability to throw on the run was really good. Many plays on tape, making plays while on the run. Shows great poise and accuracy of those throws. Takes care of the football. High success on money downs. Solid arm strength on his throws. I thought his arm strength was like a tick below, Caleb and Drake and all those guys. Very good in the mental prep and being a leader. NFL Scout said before he signed, he was telling other Michigan recruits that if they wanted to party and chase girls, go somewhere else. His class was going to be the one that restored Michigan. And to have that mentality and actually go achieve it, he's a different kind of cat. So I agreed with that. Weaknesses, needs to get a little bigger. Weight-wise, he played at about 200 pounds at Michigan, so kind of like Jaden Daniels, a little slender, needs to bulk up a little bit. His eyes and manipulating the coverage need to get better. He just wasn't asked to go beyond his first or second read very much, so I think he's going to need to develop that skill a little bit. And he still needs to develop his touch and throws to go over the linebackers in front of safeties and stuff like that. Player comps that I've seen, Alex Smith is one that I think Daniel Jeremiah has thrown on him. I've also seen Brock Purdy and Jimmy G. You said you only think there's about 3, the top 3 quarterbacks should go in the first round.
Yeah.
So you're probably not the biggest J.J. McCarthy fan, I'm taking it.
It's not that I'm not a big McCarthy fan, and I know a lot of people will think it's because of my homerism, being a right. Buckeyes fan, and I can truly respect what JJ did. And in fact, and I don't know if you'd agree with this statement, being a Buckeye fan as well, it actually kind of hurts me a little bit knowing that JJ grew up a massive Buckeyes fan and actually wanted to sign with Ohio State, and Ryan Day chose Kyle McCord over him. So then to see him kind of come in and burn the Buckeyes for 3 years really kind of hurt. I just think there's a lot more to develop in his game than people give him credit for. And I think I shouldn't say we, there's certain members of the community that are falling in love with him because of what Michigan did, not J.J. McCarthy, what Michigan did in winning a national championship, and then what he's done making these certain throws at pro day, and all of a sudden it feels like Zach Wilson all over again with like, oh my God, look at these throws. He's going to be this. And again, Zach Wilson ended up as the second pick in the NFL draft. So maybe J.J. McCarthy will end up as a first-round pick. When I look at J.J., I think he's sluggish and slow getting through his progressions. I actually think he does not do a good job of that at all. And because of that, you'll see him be late on other throws around the field, which allows defenders to get back into it. I mean, again, I know you watched the game this year. There were multiple times that Ohio State defense had chances to pick him off, and they just dropped the ball or just didn't get to it, or whatever happened, went through their hands, like, because he's so slow moving through his progressions at times, and he throws the ball late. Then, though, he'll turn around and have this amazing throw with perfect anticipation into the smallest of windows, and everybody's like, there's a JJ we love, best quarterback in college football. It's great that he can do that, and I do think NFL coaches, when they see that, say, I can get him to do that all the time, but it's so far and few between with him that I feel like people are relying so much on, like, one throw. Like, he has, like, 3 of those a year.
Okay.
And I get he doesn't throw the ball a lot because Michigan did not let him throw the ball a lot, but you can't count on 3 throws a year out of 200.
Right.
I think his mobility has been a little bit overblown. I don't even think he's up there with like Drake May as a rusher.
No, I think Drake May's better. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, yeah. I've just seen some people be like, oh, he's right up, like Jaden Daniels is the best, and he's right there with May and Caleb. And I'm like, I don't know what games you guys are watching because JJ's not that. Like, he's what I would consider JJ is he's a scrambler, not a rusher. Like, he can scramble to avoid pressure, and he is fairly good at throwing off platform and on the move and doesn't tend to lose a lot of velocity or accuracy. But I don't see him as a guy who's really going to burn you with his legs like those top 3 guys can. On top of that, like I already mentioned, how he throws the ball behind his guys a lot. I actually think his deep balls are not as good as well. Right. I think his ball placement's kind of all over the place. And I get that people say he's a winner, and I think a lot of that is perpetrated by his head coach, Jim Harbaugh, who's now in the NFL. I mean, Harbaugh's come out and said he was the best quarterback ever at Michigan. I guess maybe that's because he's won him a national championship. I mean, I would argue, granted, he didn't have the greatest college career, but Tom Brady's probably the best quarterback to ever play at Michigan. Yeah. With JJ, if you really go back and look at what Michigan has done over the last 3 years, yes, JJ has had moments and won them games, specifically the Michigan game 2 seasons ago against Ohio State, which was a massive game for both. And I feel like he was the reason they won that. Although Donovan Edwards breaking, against what was realistically a goal line defense, God knows what Ohio State was doing in some of those runs, was a big thing too. When they played Penn State this year, the entire second half of the game, they asked him to throw the ball 5 times. In the national championship, they took the ball out of his hands when it was getting down to the parts of the game where like they weren't sure if when Washington was making that push and coming back, they took the ball out of his hands and like, we're going to run the ball, we're going to play defense. They more often than even in that Ohio State game this year, when Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison started getting going on offense and they started scoring points and it was starting to look scary and that defense was stepping up, they took the ball out of JJ's hands and they let him run the ball and play defense. In my opinion, if you truly believe he is this great quarterback, you're not doing that. So I'm not saying that he can't do that at the NFL level, but UNC wasn't taking the ball out of Drake May's hands. LSU wasn't taking the ball out of Jaden Daniels' hands. And USC won Caleb Williams. And we can even go to Washington and Oregon. We're not taking it out of Michael Penix and Bo Nix's hands in those moments.
True, yeah.
I think that JJ is going to likely, in my opinion, should be a second-round pick. And if he becomes a starter, I think he could be like a QB 18 to 22 range. Like, I don't think he's bad. I just personally don't think he should be a first-round pick, and I don't think he's a guy, like, fantasy-wise, you're going to be betting your team or, like, betting to help win you a fantasy championship, personally. I just don't think that he's a good quarterback, but I don't think he's great.
Right. Okay. I can agree with that. All right, next one up, who you just mentioned, Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback from Washington. Obviously, strength, strong arm, maybe one of the strongest in the class with Drake May. Not afraid to be aggressive and push the ball downfield. Accurate on his deep balls. Great at finding vulnerable matchups and exploiting it. He's obviously a veteran, played a ton of college football. He's good throwing on the move. Great leader, has been through a lot of adversity with his injury history. Now, on the weaknesses, obviously that injury history is going to come up here again. His mechanics still need some work, which can affect his rhythm and accuracy. When rushed, he can miss some layup-type throws, inconsistent on finesse throws. Played behind a really, really good O-line with clean pockets all year at Washington. Once pressured, he broke down a little bit against good defenses like the Michigan National Championship game. Injury history is obviously going to be a concern. He did run a 4.58 40-yard dash at his pro day, but he doesn't run the ball much at all. So I hope people don't fall into that trap that's, he can be some 400, 500-yard rusher. That's just not his game at all. Player comps that I've seen, obviously Tua is one that comes up. I could see a little Mark Brunell to his game for older fans. And Jordan Love was another comparison. I just threw that one in there. I don't know if I see Jordan Love too much, but what did you think of Penix?
I think Penix is an interesting player. I also think he's probably more of like a second round project, which also concerns me because he's so old. And typically when you're coming into the NFL at that age, being labeled as a project is probably not a good thing. And again, some of that has definitely been the injuries. I mean, I think it was like 3 years in a row at Indiana, he'd played like 6 games straight because it was shoulder injury, 2 ACLs. Obviously, his best year at Indiana was actually with Kalen DeBoer, who ends up becoming Washington's head coach and has him transfer over from Indiana. And he has those 2 great seasons. So if I'm going to somewhat criticize or put a little demerit against Jaden Daniels for having Mike Denbrock as his offensive coordinator, I have to do the same thing here for Michael Penix. Kalen DeBoer is arguably one of the best play callers in all of college football. And if you go look at who Michael Penix is throwing the ball to as well, arguably the best wide receiver core in all of college football last year, and that includes having Ohio State's best wide receiver in all of college football, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, Romo Dunze, Jalen McMillan, and Jalen Polk all have shots to be first and second round picks. And Michael Penix was thrown to those guys most of that year, or most of the last 2 years. And if you go look at some of the throws that he's making to those guys as well, they are wide open. Kalen DeBoer is a master at scheming wide receivers open. You know, for NFL fans, it's like watching Sean McVay do what he does, or Kyle Shanahan in the run game, but looking at it from a passing perspective. Like Kalen DeBoer is that smart. So I do think Michael Penix had a leg up there. You know, I agree with you. The biggest thing is his mechanics. Like they're just all over the place at times. And I'm sure some of that has to do with like the fact that realistically, even this year, he was beat up a little bit in dealing with stuff, but this was like the first year that he was like fully healthy and like actually able to play through the whole season. The shoulder injury worries me a little bit as well. And I think you don't see much on his throws, so I think he's fine. But what worries me a little bit with him too is, and I would say this is a lot like Justin Herbert, is very much a see it, throw it quarterback. But Herbert throws with more anticipation than I've ever seen Michael Penix throw with. Like Penix will at times throw with anticipation, but it's not there a lot. If you go back to me and Felix, unfortunately got taken down, did a like film review on Michael Penix. And one of the games we used was the Texas bowl game from 2 years ago, not this last year where they played for the college football playoffs. And Michael Penix multiple times would when he was seeing the wide receiver come open, he would fire it. And he's got the arm strength to do that. But even in college, those defenders were then catching up and getting the ball. And there was 2 that got intercepted earlier. One got batted, should have been intercepted. The second one did get intercepted. In the NFL, you're playing the best of the best. And I think that it's harder to get away with that. You have to throw with some anticipation. I haven't seen enough of that from Michael Penix Jr. So for me, I think, you know, he's not a guy in fantasy unless he goes to an offense that's really going to just let him air it out all the time. Like he's going to be having to have like 30 plus attempts a game, 35, 40 attempts a game, throwing for 40 plus touchdowns every single, because I'm with you. He's not bringing you any rushing, especially not after all those injuries. And I just think he's got things to work on. I would be surprised if he's a first round pick. If he is, personally, I would let other people take him and I would pivot to a different position, because I don't know. I think there's a lot for him to improve on.
Yeah, I think the ideal offense for me, I know he won't get drafted there, but would be like Miami, just this quick throw offense, stuff like that. If he can get into an offense like that, I think he could really succeed. So I agree with you on that one. And I am not looking forward to Alabama with all those elite athletes in that offense. They're going to destroy people again.
Yeah.
Not looking forward to that. All right. Next one up and last one that we're going to talk about is Bo Nix, the quarterback from Oregon. Strengths, obviously a productive deep ball thrower, good throwing the ball on the move. 77.4 completion percentage last year. A lot of those were easy throws, though, screens and quick passes. Takes good care of the football, able to use his legs to extend plays. Very durable starter, has a ton of experience, started over 60 games at the college level. Ability to run. I think he's another one that could be a 200, 300-yard type rusher in the NFL. He is another coach type on the field, would sit in the coaches' meetings and go over tape and game plan film at Oregon. So he is one of those guys who's a good film rat. Weaknesses: process gets frantic and moves through his progressions too fast at times. Needs to work on his ball placement. Relies too much on arm strength instead of sound mechanics, which affects his accuracy. Too many throws into heavy traffic. Benefited from a really great O-line and quick short passes. Kind of the same thing with Penix a little bit. Player comps that I've seen Tony Romo and I've seen Andy Dalton. What do you think about Bo Nix?
So I like Bo Nix. I've said before that I thought he could be a first-round pick. I think he would be better off going as a second-round pick and sitting this year. So he would actually be the player. I know you comped someone to this earlier. You've seen comps for this earlier. He's actually the one I would comp to Alex Smith. I think that he, brings that kind of rushing. I think he's got a little bit of a stronger arm than Alex Smith, but Alex Smith, if you go back and watch what he did in the NFL and everything, it was a lot of that short passing. We didn't see him kind of take those deep shots a lot, and it's kind of why they eventually go to Patrick Mahomes, right, with Kansas City.
Right.
I mean, from everything I was told, I did not go to, with the Senior Bowl, but they were all talking about him as a bubble screen Bo is what they were calling him. Because as you mentioned, a lot of his stuff was, and it was a lot of stuff. I believe his ADOT, out of all the quarterbacks, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I want to say out of all the quarterbacks, ADOTs, his was much lower than everybody else's. And if you go to the 20+ yard throws, I think his is barely over 20 yards when you guys like Michael Penix and Jaden Daniels were in the 30+ yards. So they were actually challenging deep down the field compared to Bo Nix, but he can get the ball there. I don't know how much of that you want to blame on him and how maybe some of that was just the offensive play calling. But where I will say, for him, I kind of see the same thing with him as I did Jaden Daniels. He does a lot more of those arching throws and real zip throws, which you want to see in the NFL. The arching throws are fine. Russell Wilson's a master at them, so is Justin Fields. But at times you need to really fire it in there, and I think he struggles to do that. Interestingly enough, I actually think he struggles more when he breaks contain and gets out of the pocket than he does if he just stays in the pocket, like Caleb, Jaden Daniels, Drake May always seem to make plays. Bo Nix, I think, struggles and he tries to force the ball a little bit too much. So I don't think he should do that as much. And I do think he needs to read coverages a little bit better. I think he's got really good ball placement, but at times, especially when you get to those cover 2, cover 3s, and you have that safety over the top, he doesn't necessarily put the ball to the outside or a back shoulder of a wide receiver. He tries to lead them and it almost leads them straight into that safety. So that's something, you can do it in the NFL if you want to continue to get your wide receivers murdered or get a lot of interceptions, which I don't think he wants to do. Like I said, I think he should be a day 2 pick and a guy who, because of what he can do with his legs, I think could actually be a pretty good fantasy starter for you, but I think he still needs a little bit more seasoning, which again is insane to say because he's I think a 5th-year player. Yeah. It's a 5th year in college, but one thing I do want to point out, because you mentioned the film rat thing, and I brought this up a lot when Justin Herbert came out of college, and I mentioned it was a reason why I was so big on him. Not only is he a film rat, but he was also one of the players who won, I can't remember what it's called, but I know it's the academic Heisman. And that's just how smart you are in school as well. And I talked about when Herbert won that, players like that are that smart, if they really have that work ethic in them, they can make it work. And that's why I believe so much in Justin Herbert when he came out as well with the arm talent and everything. And Bo Nix did that. I think it was this past season, won that academic Heisman. It just shows how smart he is. He is a film rat. So I think he can figure it out and be good in the NFL. But if he goes first round, I just hope he doesn't play right off the bat because I think he needs time to really kind of get used to the NFL game and learn a little bit more.
Right. One of the stats I did find that you were mentioning, his average depth of target this year was only 6.8 yards, which is the third lowest in college.
Yeah,
so that's pretty crazy.
That's not good at all.
No, not at all. I agree with you though that him and Penix should be 2nd-round picks, if anything. We've had multiple, successful quarterbacks that went in the 2nd round. Derek Carr, Andy Dalton. Those guys went in the 2nd round. They were fine. So I think, if Bo Nix does go in the 2nd round, it's not like a death nail or anything for him. Yeah. So I agree with you on that. Is there any other quarterbacks you wanted to bring up or talk about that you like?
No, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Those are probably the main guys that I'm interested in. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think this quarterback class overall, I think there's some guys that could I don't know necessarily start, but I think the backup quarterbacks, like we could have some really good backup quarterbacks out of this class. So like, I like Jordan Travis a lot.
Yeah.
I mean his accuracy is what it is, but I think he can improve on it. I like his rushing ability. Spencer Rattler, okay on. Michael Pratt, I think is solid. Devin Leary, I really like too. Joe Milton has some upside if he could ever figure it out. So I think there's some decent quarterbacks in this draft that at least could be solid backup quarterbacks, especially after last year's NFL season with how many different quarterbacks ended up starting. Your Jake Brownings and Gardner Minshew's and all that. I think there's some guys that can come in and help the backup quarterback position. So I like that.
Yeah, actually, I forgot about that. I do want to. Michael Pratt is one that I think could be an interesting guy. That if he can, you're definitely betting on him figuring it out. But he can play it at Tulane. I don't think had the best coaching. Willie Fritz, who was his coach there, was more of like a defensive guy. Doesn't have like a ton of offensive help. But when you look at his game, and I know this isn't going to sound like a great comparison because of what he did in the NFL was not great, but he reminds me a lot of Kenny Pickett, but like with a much stronger arm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he can figure that out. The problem is same thing with him. I mentioned with Drake May, though, like his footwork is really inconsistent, which leads to inaccuracy. But I think actually has one of the stronger arms. I think it's actually up there with Michael Penix and Drake May. Like this dude can fire it all over the field, but he's just not consistent with it. If he could go to a team, this is just wishing, because I've also been a fan of Michael Pratt since I saw him in the COVID season with Tulane actually almost beat Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. If he could go to like a Los Angeles Rams and like sit for a year or so behind Matt Stafford and come out like with what he can do as a rusher as well, I think could really be, he's a guy that I think could be a consistent, like in that 12 to 15 range for fantasy quarterback because he can rush as well. But you are betting a lot on him going to the perfect situation and getting it all figured out.
Yeah, that's actually a good call with the Rams. I am interested to see if they do pick a quarterback in this draft, because I think they will, because they do have like 5th, 6th, 7th round. They have a lot of picks.
Yeah.
If they could get a guy like Pratt or a Devin Leary, somebody like that, that's somebody I'll probably be interested in. So I agree with you on that. All right, on to the running backs here. So we'll start off with my RB1, which is Jonathan Brooks, the running back from Texas. Strengths, very good run balance and vision, shifty athlete, explosive jump cuts, great at setting up defenders to miss, good hands. He's a threat in the flat with make you miss ability to gain some positive yards. Only had one fumble in his college career, but only obviously one full season. Weaknesses, inconsistent with his power and pad level, showing patience a little bit is inconsistent. Obviously, he's coming off a torn ACL. His medicals will have to check out. It was only the ACL, no other damage, so that's good. It's usually he can rehab it and be good to go. Player comps I've seen, you'll see this name come up a lot: Melvin Gordon, Jamal Charles, and Jerome Ford. I don't know about the Jamal Charles one, but I could definitely see some Melvin Gordon to his game. What do you think about Brooks?
Yeah, I like Brooks. Obviously had the injury this year, which you hate to see, because I agree with you, probably would be easily the running back one. I think, again, this is a weird RB class, so like the rankings are kind of all over the place, but I think had he finished the season, would have been the pretty easy RB1. Agree with you on, his so I think he's a good but not great running back, which I think you can say about a lot of these running backs. Like, I think he moves really well. I think he displays incredible vision. I think does have pretty good burst and what I would call lateral agility, kind of moving behind the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
What I don't know that I don't feel like he does good as at times that he questions himself a little bit too much. You'll see him at times press holes and then kind of back out and look for another one when he just needs to go through. Some of that I think is he just kind of lacks some physicality. Like, he's a good rusher and he's not afraid to square defenders up, but like he just doesn't have that, maybe it's the lower leg strength, whatever it is, to really kind of push piles and drive through defenders. He's okay at making defenders miss, but I don't think he's great there. But I think adding the receiving part of his game in there is going to help him as well for us on a fantasy side of things. Yeah. So I think overall he's going to be a very fun player to watch, and I'm going to be interested to see kind of like where he goes. Does he fall out of the first round? Well, the first round, my bad. If he falls out of the second round, goes into the third, Does he end up like a day 3 pick because of the injury, which I don't think would be too bad for him because I still think he's extremely talented. But I really want to see where he goes because I think that will matter most. I was trying to think of like where I would comp him, but I don't have a good comp for him.
Yeah.
So
I think second round is kind of where everybody has kind of pegged him in, especially at the Dallas pick, just because they're the ones who performed the surgery on his knee. So they're obviously going to have the most info on him. If he does go to Dallas, I think it's going to be hard to keep him out of the first round in rookie drafts.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
going to be at the back round of first just because it's Dallas.
Yeah.
But I would like that spot for him if he went there. I think that would be a good spot. I don't know if he'll be ready to go week 1, but maybe, after week 5, kind of like Breece Hall was this year, after the first couple weeks, he can be ready to go. So I agree with you. I like Jonathan Brooks. My RB2, I believe, Blake Corum, running back from Michigan. Strengths, makes quick decisions, always gets positive yards. He's always moving forward, runs with good balance, can break off tackles, make defenders bounce off of him. Last season, he had 24 runs of 20-plus yards or more, so he can make some big plays happen. Obviously, that's a lot of Michigan's offensive line, too, opening up some fucking gaping holes. Has a nose for the end zone. Weaknesses, he's a smaller back at 5'7". He can be a dump-off option in the pass game, but a limited route tree in college. Obviously, Michigan's not throwing to the running backs that often. Needs to be more patient with his blockers to make moves. Needs to be more creative in the open field. Suffered a torn meniscus and sprained MCL in 2022 at the end of the season. Player comps that I've seen, Devontae Freeman, Khalil Herbert, and CJ Anderson. Those are just smaller backs that kind of had some success in the NFL. What did you think of Corum?
Again, here we go. Maybe it's a little bit of bias. I think that he is a good running back, but I don't disagree at all with the statement you made in there about Michigan's offensive line helped him out a lot. And that is where I do worry a little bit about what he will do translate into the NFL. Obviously, he's got a ton of talent. I mean, especially at that size, like people will hear 5'7" and think, well, he can't be that good. I mean, he's rocked up for a dude who's 5'7", and he can, he does it, which is impressive as well because he does really good job of like absorbing contact, really good contact balance, got that lower body strength, so he will drive piles, he will run defenders over even at that size. But what does worry me for the NFL and him being like a true fantasy stud is, and you mentioned it as well, like he's not really good when he gets that second level, like making defenders miss. Like he struggles with that. I think that him and I'm sure running back we'll talk about here in a minute, Braylon Allen are what I call runway runners. Like if they don't have a clear runway to get going, they will not hit their top speed. It takes them a lot of time to get there. So unless he gets those gaping holes that Michigan was opening for him, I think it's going to be hard for him to reach his top speed, which means he likely won't get those 20-plus yard runs in the NFL like he was getting in college football. And it does worry me a little bit that like he can work in the receiving game, but he's not nearly as good as like Donovan Edwards, who they really use there. He reminds me a lot of like a Bishop Sankey, D'Angelo Williams type player. Like D'Angelo Williams was like Bishop Sankey never really worked out in the NFL. D'Angelo Williams was good. So like I think, and the funny thing with D'Angelo Williams and why I like that comp for him is he was also in a two-headed backfield, much like Blake Corum was at Michigan, where it was him and Jonathan Stewart. So like I do think if Blake Corum can end up in a backfield where he's used the way he was in Michigan is like that hammer role. Maybe he isn't just a first and second down back, but the chances are he'll also be used in the red zone as the goal line back, and he'll rack up those touchdowns. So, like, he is a guy that I'm intrigued by, but I think landing spot is going to be massive for him. I don't think he can overcome certain offenses if he lands in an offense that doesn't use him the right way.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone kind of is hoping he goes to the Chargers, and we'll see what happens there. Like, if he does that, I think he'll be all right. But yeah, we'll see on Corum. I could see some of the concerns too. Hopefully he goes to somewhere with a good offensive line and doesn't end up with New England or Washington or something.
Yeah,
like
Washington would be really, really bad.
Yeah. All right, next one up, Trey Benson, running back, Florida State. Strength, impressive contact balance, great linear burst for twitchy, good movements, great footwork, can pause in the hole, then get back going quickly. 0 fumbles in his college career, which is very good for fantasy. Don't want him out on the field. Good out of the backfield on swings and reel routes. Has made multiple big plays in his career in the past game I've seen. Weaknesses, runs a little upright, inconsistent vision and anticipation. Bounces and misses cutback lanes at times. Obviously, the medicals will be huge for him. He had a major knee injury at Oregon where he tore his ACL, MCL, and meniscus tears. Some player comps that I've seen for him are some really high-end comps. Melvin Gordon was another one for him. Todd Gurley I saw, and I put in Breece Hall, and that was because of the athletic testing was really, really close to what Breece Hall was. Size, weight, running, all that stuff. So what did you think about Trey Benson?
Yeah, I mean, I like Trey Benson. He's had, 2 fairly good seasons. Again, I think decent lateral agility for a guy his size, which is what you like to see. Those guys who can move around behind the line of scrimmage. Like I said, I think, or like you said, I'm sorry, I do think that he does a good job hitting holes. I do think his vision, which you mentioned, is kind of hit or miss at times. And some of that I'm sure is Florida State's offensive line is not great, it was kind of the same thing we were talking about with Cam Akers. But the difference is Trey Benson does a good job of when he makes that commitment, he goes through and actually gets yardage, where Cam Akers, I felt danced around a little bit too much in the backfield and was very home run or bust, or strikeout, kind of thing. Benson does not do that. Benson does do a good job of it feels like always falling forward, getting those positive yards every chance that he gets. Yeah. What else? Really good receiver. So, I comp him to Rachaad White. That's kind of the running back that I see with him, because I do think, again, kind of the lack of vision is there too. Where I would like to see him improve is I feel like he leaves a lot of yards on the field, whether it's making defenders miss or being not as physical I think he could be, especially at his size. I feel like he could lower his shoulder and really take out defenders if he wants to, and we just don't see that. I think sometimes he gets too he just tries to make defenders miss too much at times and tries to just juke them out when you just drop your shoulder, buddy, and just level that defender. And you want to see him do that, because I think once you do that at times too, with his ability to kind of use that burst and speed, he can then go and get upfield. So he's another really intriguing running back. I would not be surprised if he ends up being the RB1 from a fantasy point of view in a couple years out of this class. I think he's got that potential.
Yeah, I agree with you on that for sure. He could definitely be the RB1 in this class, so I agree. Next one up, we're going to talk about Jalen Wright, the running back from Tennessee. Obviously, his strengths, great burst and speed to blow through the holes, a perfect fit for a Shanahan-type offensive scheme. Looks to bounce it outside and make plays with his speed and ability to erase defender pursuit angles are pretty impressive. Runs with good strength. Decent when targeted in the pass game as well. Weaknesses, tries to spin out of contact too much instead of running through people. With his size, he can easily do that. Vision can be a little inconsistent to miss holes, cut back lanes. I thought he looked to bounce it outside a little too much too, so I think he needs to get better at that. I think one of the good player comps for him is Raheem Mostert. I thought that was a really good one. I've also seen Melvin Gordon, and then Josh Norris of Underdog said his high-end comp could be a David Johnson.
Oh, okay. I like that. I really don't have much to add. I think you kind of nailed all that. My biggest thing with him, the speed is there, incredible jump cut. So I know this is going to sound like an outrageous comp, but what he reminds me of when he runs and just his playmaking is almost like a Reggie Bush light. I really think with the way he just darts, it feels like he's almost on air at times when he's moving and making defenders miss. His jump cuts, I think, are really special. Really, really good lateral agility. Does not lose any speed when changing directions and bursting upfield or moving back and forth. And his receiving play, I think, is really good. But as a runner, he struggles with a lot. And you kind of pointed a lot of those out. The main thing being vision is just not good at all, in my opinion. You mentioned he runs upright, which I don't like at all. Fumbled I don't remember how many. He had a decent amount of fumbles. I think it was either this year or last season. I think some of that comes from that upright motion. Like he just doesn't do a good job of protecting the ball, which is going to be a big deal. I'd be very intrigued to see where he goes because like he has got like I'd love for him to end up with like Mike McDaniels or Kyle Shanahan and be like that change of pace receiving back because he'll just blow up. And of course, everybody will take him in the first round of fantasy drafts because he lands with one of those teams. But like he's special, but like I'm still a little bit concerned of what he's going to be as an actual rusher of the football. But like just playmaking ability, he's got it all. He's a really fun player.
Yeah, if he ended up if San Francisco decided to move on from Elijah Mitchell, I think Jalen Wright there would be a perfect spot for him there. So I agree with you on that. Next one up is the guy you mentioned earlier, Braylon Allen. His strength, obviously, he's going to be one of the youngest prospects in a while. He's going to be 20 years old. He won't turn 21 until next January. Above average vision and patience at the line. Able to make sharp lateral cuts, makes moves behind his blockers, and can be patient. Decent enough pass catcher this year that he showed off to be someone in the flats who can do a little bit of damage. Weakness, average hole burst and speed to the outside. Despite his big body frame, he isn't a battering ram. You think he would be. Not as creative with the ball in his hands, which we mentioned a little bit earlier. Ball security was also an issue. 9 fumbles in his career. A couple player comps I've seen are Tyler Algier and Michael Bush, if you remember Michael Bush from the Louisville days. What did you think of Braylon?
Yeah, I'm not a massive fan. I'm so glad you didn't go Derrick Henry because I just hate when people say that because Derrick Henry is such a great like runner.
And he's also 6'4" monster.
Yeah, like it's just everybody saw Braylon Allen as a true freshman. It's like, oh, the next Derrick Henry. He's never done anything. Like I also hate, and I know you weren't saying this, but I hate when people talk about, oh, well, he's just so young and all this. I mean, I get he's only 20 years old. Yes, he reclassified, came to college early, and he moved from linebacker to running back, and we have seen Tyler Algier succeed somewhat at that at the NFL level. And Braylon Allen has more talent than Tyler Algier. I don't think that's unfair to say. But Tyler Algier improved every single year as a running back. Braylon Allen, to me, is still as raw as day one as a freshman as he is right now coming into the NFL. Like, he has not really improved in the nuances as a rusher. I think his footwork behind the line is just slow, and he's very, like, tight-hipped when he runs. He's not good in tight spaces. Like, this dude, like, again, with his size, as you mentioned, you'd expect when he's in the hole, you'll take defenders with you to get those yards. He doesn't do that very well. I don't think that he's very good at squeezing through tight spaces as well. And as I mentioned earlier with Blake Corum, he can get up to, I think it's like 21 or 22 miles per hour is like what real analytics has tracked him at in runs in high school or in college. The problem is he is a runway runner. If he doesn't get like 30 straight yards to get running, he's not getting to that. And he's just average at best. He is very much a boomer bust type running back. Like everybody talks about his big plays. I'll use the Ohio State game because I know you watched that. If you go back to a year ago with him against Ohio State, the dude had like 20 yards for the entire game. And then against the second string defense, he bust off a 60-yard run to get to like close to 100 yards. And everybody goes back to Braylon Allen's this great running back. No, he had one carry for 60-plus yards, was shut down the rest of the game. I even think if he goes to San Francisco or Miami, he's one of the guys in this draft that I'm letting my league mates take because I just don't see the upside with him at all.
Yeah, I think for his last year here, he got that new offensive coordinator that kind of runs the shotgun offense, and I just think that does not fit him well. It's almost like when the Eagles had Chip Kelly and they brought in DeMarco Murray. That just did not work at all. So I think Braylon's going to have to be in an offense that runs from under center. Like if he got with Harbaugh and those guys there, I think that would be a good spot for him. But yeah, he needs to kind of be in a certain kind of offense. If he's asked to run out of the shotgun a lot, I don't think that's going to be very good for him at all. So
yeah, I agree.
Not looking forward to that. Any other running backs you kind of want to talk about before we move on to receivers that you like?
One of the guys, and I mean, I've been on him for a while, but I think could be really good is Raymond Davis. I was a big fan of his as a true freshman coming out of Temple, was a really good running back for them. ended up having like multiple injuries, unfortunately, a lot like who were we talking about earlier? Michael Penix. Obviously different positions and everything, but like has multiple injuries throughout his career. But really kind of put it together with actually Vanderbilt of all teams 2 years ago. Was really good for them, ends up going over to Kentucky and having a really good year. Obviously, I think he messes around. So I mentioned earlier, Cam Akers kind of danced around the backfield a little bit too much. Ray Davis does that at times. I think that he doesn't press the hole as often as he should, and could be a little bit better at making players miss in the open field. But some of that I think was returning. We saw a little bit more of that at Kentucky than we had seen over the past years. And some of that, again, I think was just due to his injuries, knee injuries, multiple ACL injuries. And that might scare some people off, but with Ray, like, with a running back, I just want him for 3 years. And so why I think he could be a really intriguing running back is his receiving ability as well. I don't know if anybody saw, I think it was actually Jay Rich tweeted out like that amazing catch he had at the Senior Bowl. Like his hands, I think you could argue are right there with Jalen Wright as the best in this running back position. My comp for him is Mark Ingram. Like, I think that's what he could be at the NFL level. So if he ends up going as like an early day, I don't think he'll go day 2. I think he could go day 2. I don't think he will. And I'll be full honest with you. I know him, have an actual relationship with him and his father, so I am rooting for him. But I think if he goes early day 3 and lands on a team that is intriguing, he could be like the surprise of this group that all just comes out of nowhere and is like that David Johnson. Where you're like, what the, like, this dude was a day 3 pick and ends up he's that good, but also in making the David Johnson comp, and like, you could see him have like 2 incredible years and then just fall off a cliff, unfortunately, because like he's just got nothing left in those knees.
Obviously, like Tajay Spears has that knee issue stuff. Jay Ajayi back in the day had the same kind of issues. But no, I like Ray Davis. He's in my top 8 for running back, so that's a good call. His catching ability. He had that one catch last year where he caught it on one sideline, basically ran across the field, went up and scored a touchdown on it. That was a really nice play. Couple other guys that I like Blake Watson from Memphis. I think that's a sleeper guy that's later on that could be somebody. Obviously, a lot of people like Tyrone Tracy from Iowa or Iowa Purdue, whatever you want to classify him as. A lot of people like Marshawn Lloyd too. I have Marshawn Lloyd kind of high, but he needs to improve like on his fumbles, and he tries to bounce it out 2 side, make the big play way too much. Some other guys like Kamani Vidal, that's another one a lot of people like. I think could be a good sleeper. Dylan Lobb, the guy from New Hampshire, that he could be a Danny Woodhead type catcher. So there's quite a few running backs in this one. The one I got to ask you on, because I talked with Scott on it, and I don't like him at all. I was like almost falling asleep when I was watching some of his stuff. And everyone loves him because of his testing. That Isaac Guerendo.
I was curious. I was debating on bringing him up. He's intriguing to me because of what he can do. So I actually wrote his profile up for our rookie guide, and it's one of those things where we're like, we knew of Guerendo because he was at Wisconsin, and Wisconsin's just done so. I mean, say what you want. We both just talked about we're not massive fans of Bray Atlanta, but Wisconsin recruits running backs. Like, they know what they're doing when they bring in these running backs. And so he was there before transferring out and ending up at Louisville. And what I like about him is he's a little bit raw, but like what I've seen in certain things, especially last year at Louisville, in like how quickly he's able to identify the hole, and then the testing you see on the football field, and the fact like his burst, he gets through that hole so quick and he can get to his top speed quick, which at the NFL does matter. And I think running back is the one position where you can just be a really good athlete and not necessarily be good at the position and succeed. So like with that speed and everything, I think he could be interesting, but he's not very physical, even for his size, which I think, is 6 foot 220 plus. Like, you should be more physical. Footwork is really bad. I mentioned he doesn't really do a good job of pressing holes and then bouncing back out and hitting that cutback lane. And the one thing that really worries me, I went back and watched, I want to say it was like 6 or 7 games of him. Okay. like 70% of his runs were all to the left. Like this dude running to the right was just like lost in the woods. Like it's like Stevie Wonder out there trying to figure out where to go. It's that bad. So like obviously if all you're going to do is run to the left in the NFL, you're not going to succeed. But like I do think he is intriguing because of his athletic testing and his speed. Again, for me, it's like, where does he land? Where does he get drafted? I feel like because of what he did at the combine, people are going to be much higher on him than I am. And so he's going to go earlier than I'm going to be willing to pull the trigger on him. But like, again, if he ends up at like a really good spot, like a place I would actually love for him to go would be to Cleveland, because that offensive line and opening holes for him and just letting him use his burst and speed to just hit through the hole and go, especially if Nick Chubb's down for a little bit. I mean, I will give Nick my knees if I can to make him healthy. I love that man so much. But like, I think he could be the perfect change of pace back to a Nick Chubb. But if he can go to a place like that, like a great offensive line that's going to open holes for him and just kind of make it easier for him to just like see hole through hole, I think he could be a really intriguing fantasy player.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still not sold on him. Like I said, when I was watching his stuff, it was like, it just was boring to me. I don't know. And then obviously once I think he got more starts towards the end of the season. I think Jordan got hurt. That's kind of like when he took off a little bit. So that's kind of what I thought of him. All right, wide receivers. Obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. I have his strengths written down as everything.
Yeah, not false.
Yeah. Weaknesses. He's not like really the true yak weapon that like Malik Neighbors and those guys are. I wish he had more make you miss to him. He only had 5 forced tackles missed in 2023. Some of his player comps, obviously some of the best out there. Larry Fitzgerald I've seen, and another one had CeeDee Lamb, which I could see a little bit too. But yeah, I'll let you gush about Marvin.
Oh, I mean, there's really not much to say. He's arguably one of the best wide receivers we've seen in college in a long time. And I mean, obviously, with what Jamar Chase did and Justin Jefferson, both at LSU, obviously what they were able to do. And it sucks that Marvin's not getting the love that those guys got because, unfortunately he wasn't ever able to win like that national championship and everything. But I just think what he's able to do, I think the only thing you can knock him for is he's just not a yak weapon. Like, I think that's really it. What I would actually say he's more of is like he reminds me a lot of Julio Jones, but like he doesn't have like that yak. Like that's kind of the only thing. But like this dude, I mean, you throw the ball in the area code and he finds a way to come down and get it. I mean, it took, I'm sure everybody watched that game. I know you did, but like in that Georgia playoff game, which I think probably the best playoff game we've actually seen throughout the entire college football playoffs a couple years ago. And he got legitimately knocked out and was like fighting to get back in there. Like he's got that in him. He wants to do everything he can to win. I love an interview he gave recently saying like he'd love to go to Indy to be able to kind of like continue in that Harrison dynasty and kind of be able to do all the same things that his dad did for the Colts. Like I just think he's again, you might be say this is biased. Fine. I think it's like 0.1% chance this dude fails. Like I just think he's got everything there. And if the one thing you're going to tell me is okay, so he's not going to break off like a bunch of 60-yard plays, fine. Put him in an offense with a quarterback who can chuck it 60 yards and he's going to catch it and run the 3 it takes to get into the end zone. Like he's really, really damn good.
I mean, Devontae Adams doesn't do any of that, and Devontae Adams catches 120 balls a year. So I think Marvin Harrison could easily be one of these 100 catch every single year type guys. Like an AJ Green. I've seen another comparison to him. I could see him easily being one of those types. So, not really much to talk about there.
If he could just end up like DeAndre Hopkins type volume, right? And I don't think that's even unfair to say too. Hopkins very much a possession receiver as well. Like if he can just get that, he will be a locked in top wide receiver every single year in fantasy.
Agreed. Malik Neighbors, the wide receiver from LSU. Strength, obviously his separation skills are elite. Downfield threat on all kinds of routes. 1 catch of 20 yards or more in each game last season, which is incredible. 78% of his plays were either a first down or a touchdown in 2023. attacks the ball with his hands. Great yak, obviously, can play outside or inside. Was dynamic at slot fades. That whole offense was slot fades. It's just, if you watched Brian Thomas and Neighbors tape, it was just all slot fade touchdowns, it seemed like. Multiple touchdowns on that play. Good route runner as well. Weaknesses, occasional drops, had 5 in 2023, and just average body size and strength. I think he just needs to get a little bit bigger. Some player comps that I've seen, Justin Jefferson was one of the big ones. I think more Jalen Waddle for me, and Brandon Ayuk is another one that came up. Okay. So all these guys are really good yak guys as well. Yeah. What do you think of Neighbors?
Yeah, I mean, extremely talented. I comp him more to like a Mike Wallace, which doesn't sound like a really sexy comp, but I just think with what he's able to do as a yak guy, it is up there, and specifically a deep threat. I think he's got all the talent in the world. I personally would not put him to Justin Jefferson territory, and maybe not even Jalen Waddle, because like what those two do that I think Neighbor struggles at a little bit, like both those guys are like elite route runners. Like those guys are incredible in running routes. I think Neighbors lacks a little bit in that. Like I don't think he does such a good job in like selling his routes with head fakes to defenders. I don't think he sinks his hips as well when he's trying to make those cuts in routes. And overall, I think could just improve on that. And it goes back to a little bit what I said, Jade and Daniels earlier with Mike Denbrock and the way they were scheming him open. I mean, you mentioned he can play all over the field. A lot of his big plays came when he was in the slot. He was getting those free releases. Now, that's not a knock on him because Justin Jefferson was doing that at times at LSU too. And we've seen what JJ has done in the NFL. But I wouldn't put him quite on JJ's territories. Again, we're talking about one of the best in the NFL. Like, I don't think it's unfair to say Malik Neighbors may not be that, but I think he's got all the talent in the world to be that. And if you're talking about him being like a little, like what I'm saying is he's just a little bit raw as a route runner, that can be improved. That's not something that can't be worked on. So like if he improves that, maybe he jumps up into that territory. But I think incredible player. I think he's like, for me, it's Marvin Harrison in tier 1, Malik Neighbors in tier 2, and then everybody else comes below that. Like I think those two are the two special guys in this class.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, hell, if he can give us a Jalen Waddle career that Jalen Waddle's had so far, I think I'd be happy with that. So
yeah.
I like that. Next one up is Rome Odunze, the wide receiver from Washington. Obviously, his strengths, really good size, very low drop rate, has the ability to snatch the ball in contested situations. Has that kind of my ball attitude. He's just going to fucking go get it. Plays through contact very well. Physical wide receiver. Tracks the ball downfield extremely well. Great route runner as well. Weaknesses. Needs to expand the route tree a little bit. Average and change of direction skills. Elusiveness is only mediocre at best. Some of his player comps. DeAndre Hopkins, Alshon Jeffrey, and Des Bryant. I think more like Hopkins and Jeffrey is probably what I would be looking for. I really like Odunze. What do you think of him?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's very good for what he does. Like I personally didn't believe in like he was better than Marvin Harrison or in that conversation with Marvin Harrison, but I do think he's a very good wide receiver. He's going to be a day one pick. I agree with you. Like I love his just go get the ball mentality. Like he almost plays like a defensive back at times. Like you see those guys just attack the ball in the air and taking out wide receivers. Like he does that from the wide receiver position. So I love that. I do think, could improve a little bit more in his route running. I agree with you. Route tree is a little bit limited. Some of that I think goes back to, what I mentioned with Michael Penix and Kalen DeBoer. Like DeBoer just so good at scheming those guys wide open that he didn't have to do as much as that. I do think at times I think how do I put this? At times I think he plays a little too physical. Like there's times I think he could move away from that physicality and maybe go with a little bit more of a finesse player. Because I do think he's got the ability to make players miss, but I guess I don't really have an issue with that because he does make it work. But I'd like to see him do a little bit more of that. But yeah, I think overall, really good player. Like I said, I don't think personally he's on that tier of like Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. But like I think, for me, when I look at him as a fantasy player, I see him as like a very consistent, like wide receiver 2, probably his entire career, and has those wide receiver 1 seasons. But like Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. are the guys I think could be like consistent in like the top 5 to 10, or those two guys. Like if you talked about this class, who finishes as a wide receiver, like the number one wide receiver in fantasy for years, it's Harrison or Neighbors. I don't know that Odunze ever gets like even to like the top 5.
Yeah. I mean, obviously he'd have to get a little bit faster, but I think his separation skills aren't like the greatest. He always had like that defender in his back pocket, but he was just so good at contested catches and all that. So he didn't really have to worry about that.
Yeah. He's really good at separating at the catch point, not within the route.
Yeah. All right. Next one up is the other LSU wide receiver, Brian Thomas Jr. Obviously, his strengths: outstanding size, speed athlete, ran a 4.33 40 at the combine. Another great slot fade player, just like Neighbors. Acceleration is good off stutter and double move type plays. Good ball tracker down the field, can box out defenders to make contested catches, and can make the first man miss for some yak opportunities. Weakness: needs to get bigger and stronger on his frame. Route tree needs to expand a little at the next level as well. He has a chance to be an X receiver in the NFL, which would be nice, but maybe ultimately doesn't work out there. Player comps I've seen, I think Underdog said Brashad Perriman, taller Terry McLaurin, and I could see a little bit of T. Higgins in him as well. What did you think of Brian Thomas Jr.?
Yeah, I like Brian Thomas Jr. I comp him more to like a Devontae Parker type player. I think so he definitely has how's the word that you want? How do I word this? Like he's concentration drops. Like there are times those balls are right there and he's just dropping them. It's just concentrated. It's one of those like he's ready to run before the ball's actually in his hands. Has those drops. I think that. Specifically on comeback routes, lazy's not the word that I want to use, but I feel like he just kind of slows down a little bit too much within some of those routes on the comebacks and everything, and allows defenders to get back into him, and it ends up causing him to fight for a ball that he shouldn't. Like if he just finishes out the route, he gets it. And for his speed, for whatever reason, I feel like he just lacked a little bit with plays after the catch. Like I don't feel like he was as explosive after the catch that he could be with his testing speed. Right. So, like, I want to see that improved a little bit. But, like, Devontae Parker, like, if you're talking about speed-wise, like, I think he could be what everybody hoped Christian Watson was going to be that never really he thrived to. You also talk about the drops with him as well. Like, I think Thomas has a chance to be that player everybody wanted Christian Watson to be. But, yeah, fun player, should be a pretty good fantasy wide receiver.
Yeah, that's a good call of Christian Watson. I didn't even really think about that until you brought it up, so that's a good one. Next one up, Ladd McConkey, the wide receiver from Georgia. Obviously, lightning quick on his releases, really good route runner. Manipulates the coverage very well, transitions out of breaks extremely well to get separation. Good yak ability to find some extra yards after the catch. He's a student of the game type player, smart, isn't just a slot receiver, can play outside just as well, but he probably ends up as a slot in the NFL. Weaknesses: lean body size and bulk, needs to get stronger to beat press coverage, has had a few injuries over the course of his career, banged up a little bit. Player comps that I've seen Elijah Moore was one comp. One that I kind of think he could be is maybe a Cooper Kupp type player, or Adam Thielen. I saw a little bit of Adam Thielen in him too. What did you think of Ladd?
Yeah, I mean, Ladd's got probably the sweetest footwork in the class, and we've made jokes over at Camps to Kent because Felix loved him. Felix has been talking about Ladd McConkey since before Ladd McConkey was a thing, and the running joke is you just compare him to like every white receiver that's ever played the game. So like, that's what it is. But I do think he's got a shot more than most to be a Cooper Kupp type player if he gets the volume. Like, I agree with you. He's gonna be a slot wide receiver, but he has the vertical speed to like be a decent like deep threat as well. And I think that also helps him out being the slot, because much like in college, you're going to get more free releases from the slot than you are if you're playing on the outside. But really good hands, very, very smart, which I know you mentioned it. Like, you go watch him at Georgia, they're so often he finds just those holes in coverages and just sits there and lets Stetson Bennett, Carson Beck get him the ball. Like, I don't want to underrate his knowledge of the game, and I think that could really help him in the NFL. You know, I don't have a great comp for him because I think it is kind of like all over the place. Like, he reminds me a lot of like an Emmanuel Sanders, who I think he could play like that in the NFL. My biggest fear with McConkey is, like we both said, slot wide receiver. Like, when you're a slot wide receiver, you are very reliant on volume from your NFL quarterback to succeed. It's like that's kind of where I get worried.
Yeah, he's going to have one of those, quarterbacks that, distribute the ball like that. Stafford, Cousins, those types of wide, quarterbacks that can just pepper him with targets. I think that would be his best fit in the NFL. Next one up. So this one's interesting because I just listening to some podcasts today. I've gotten some more info about him, which is Adonai Mitchell, the wide receiver from Texas. Strengths: long, loose athlete, long striding acceleration to read top speed. Solid route runner, outstanding body control, and can pinpoint or high point the balls and go get it. Weaknesses: can stand to get a little bit bigger and stronger with his frame. Physical DBs will give him some problems. Small hands, can drop the ball occasionally. Never was a high volume target in college. Didn't command a lot of targets. I don't even know if he had more than 4 or 5 catches in any game this year. One thing that I heard on the podcast today, that some teams have kind of taken him off their board, might fall out of the first round now. Sounds like from the one, he might have type 1 diabetes. And so obviously that's not a concern, but it sounds like if it's not managed by him, he kind of can be a dick and not want to practice and stuff like that. If somebody is with him, making sure he's doing all of his stuff, it sounds like he's, a good teammate. He'll practice and all that stuff. So it's kind of like he's almost like a different person if it's not like kind of handled. So he's going to have to maybe have somebody with him to kind of make sure he's good to go. Player comps I've seen: George Pickens. I think I really like that one. I've seen also Devontae Parker, and I've seen Sammy Watkins as well. What did you think of Adonai?
Yeah, I mean, Adonai obviously has the talent to be a top wide receiver.
Yeah.
It really comes down to, I mean, it's not even just been the questions about the off-field stuff. There's been obviously all the talk about him being lazy on the field, like not finishing out routes. You can tell when he's not going to get the ball specifically in run plays because he doesn't even pass block. Like that kind of stuff, I think, is what's going to hurt him more than anything. Because you can get away with that in college because you're such a talented athlete that coaches are like, yeah, we can't put anybody else at the wide receiver position to be better than you. We need you out there to win. In the NFL, if you do that kind of stuff, you'll get benched, and it doesn't matter how good you are. So, he's a very talented wide receiver. I like the George Pickens comp as well, and I think he could be that, but I think he's got to get his. I don't actually think it's unfair to even say the same thing with George. What George Pickens had to deal with when he came in there. You got to get your head screwed on straight a little bit to be able to do that and succeed. So it'll be intriguing to see where he goes. I personally think he's more of like a day 2 pick. I would be surprised if he goes day 1, but it'll be interesting to see where he lands. I would, with his play style, I would actually love for him. Granted, well, Bill's not there anymore. I was going to say, I'd love to see him go to New England because I feel like Bill would have been able to whip him into shape and give that playmaker to Drake May. But that's probably unfair to say, but maybe Mike Tomlin, because he does such a good job of just managing these egos and everything coming in the door. But they've got I don't really have a decent wide receiver room anymore. They just traded away. Golly, what's his name?
Deontay.
Yeah, Deontay. So maybe he could. I don't know that you want to deal with him and George Pickens on at the same time, but
that could be difficult. If he did end up with the Steelers, I definitely would be interested because they have such a great track record of drafting wide receivers, especially in round 2 and 3. So that would be intriguing. Yeah, we'll see what happens with Adonai. I mean, I know Adam Schefter came out a couple days ago and said he expects Adonai to be a high 20s player in the draft. But today I listened to 2 different ones that say he's fallen out the first round. He's off people's boards. So who knows where he's going right now. Last wide receiver I have on here is Xavier Worthy, his teammate at Texas. Strengths, obviously his speed, crisp and sudden out of his cuts. Eats up cushion in a hurry. DBs respect his speed, so comebacks and curls he could definitely make the play on. Great for yak opportunities as well with that speed. Weaknesses: slender frame, needs to bulk up a little bit. Too many focus drops. I know a lot of people have talked about his drops. Does have a few injury concerns. Route running could stand to be a little bit better as well. Player comps: Some people have said he has flashes of Deshaun Jackson. I heard T.Y. Hilton yesterday from the Underdog guys. I thought that was a good one, and Brandon Cooks as well. What did you think about Worthy?
Yeah, I mean, I like Worthy. My big fear with him is like when you're that fast and you're a field stretcher, but your hands are that bad. Like I have questions about what you're going to be as a fantasy asset. Like he reminds me a lot of Hollywood Brown, Ted Ginn Jr. Like he's just got special speed that could be incredible, and I would love if he ended up with an offensive coordinator that would use him in the short and intermediate areas as well, even if it's just like those jet sweeps or quick screen passes, and just let his speed do the work to get you some fantasy points, because it's more than he has a lot of those concentration / focus drops. And I mean, he's not even credited with some, like you go back, I mentioned me and Felix did that Washington, Texas game. In that game, I think he was only credited with like 2 drops. He had like 4 drops by halftime, and they just didn't even credit him with a couple of those. Like his hands is just, I don't want to say bad. I just don't get, he just drops the ball a lot. And in my opinion as well, he is not a good ball tracker for a deep threat either. Like he loses it when he has to look over his shoulder, or if he just loses it for a second, like he's done. Ball tracking is horrible. And we saw a lot of that. If you go back to the 2020, more happened in 2022 than it did in 2023. But if you look at the 2023 season as well, a lot of that stuff got blamed on Quinn Ewers. But there are times like he throws that ball, and like if Xavier Rhodes just keeps running the route he's running, it's right in the breadbasket for him. But he cuts and he turns and he loses the ball, and he doesn't pick it back up. Like as a deep threat, you can't do that. You can't have bad hands and ball tracking. So like, I have no doubt he goes first round because he's just a special athlete. But like, it's one of those things where like I really worry about. I like the Deshaun Jackson comp because like Deshaun Jackson had his moments, but he was very boom bust. Like if you didn't have him in best ball, you were starting him as like, great, he won me the week because he just got me 30 points because he just went off. And then the next week, you're like, yeah, he just lost me 3 weeks in a row because he only got me 5 points every single one of those weeks. So like I could see Worthy being that kind of player.
Yeah. I mean, you were talking about like the jet sweeps and stuff. It kind of reminds me, like, Kansas City would do that with Tyreek. I'm not saying he's going to be Tyreek Hill or anything, but if he did end up going there, I think that would be a good spot. Obviously, Miami runs that kind of stuff. I don't know if Miami would be interested in taking him, but it wouldn't shock me if Miami took him in round 1 just because of that speed, and now you add Xavier Worthy to Tyreek Hill and Waddle. That would be pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Any of the other wide receivers you want to talk about? I mean, there's Leggett, Ricky Pearsall, Malachi Corley. A lot of people are on. Keon Coleman. Anybody else?
One that really intrigued me, and to do the Shaquille O'Neal meme, like I apologize, I didn't recognize your game, or however that thing goes, is Anaya Smith from Texas A&M. Now he's a small player, 5'9". I think like 190-ish, but
something like that, yeah.
He reminds me of like Amon Ra with game-breaking speed. Like that is how good I think he can be. Now, this is a guy who played running back at Texas A&M for a year, then moved back to wide receiver when they needed him to, just excels at those go routes and slant routes. Like when he gets that ball in his hand, he's fun to watch. Incredible burst, incredible speed, really good hands as well. Does a really good job of making defenders miss. And what I really love about the fact that he played running backs, I feel like that improved his vision. When you're watching him run in the open field after the ball's in his hand as a wide receiver, like he's always just like eliminating the pursuit angles. He's running up the field at the right time, cutting back in when he sees those defenders coming at him. Like he's really good at that. Very versatile as well. Can play outside. Obviously in the NFL, he's going to be more of a slot guy. And I think you're not going to play outside at 5'9", but just incredible versatility, really good hands. Like injury history is a struggle for him as well. He had multiple injuries, was really bad when getting pressed at the line. Some of that I think is just his size. Like when you get pressed against physical corners, you're not going to be able to succeed there. And his route running is a little bit raw. But again, I think some of that was injuries. Played running back for a year at Texas A&M and then moved back out to wide receiver. But a really fun player that like I don't think is going to be on many people's like draft boards. And I think you could probably take it like the 3rd round, maybe 4th round of your rookie drafts. And just be a guy who could like legitimately blow up and be an incredible player for you in fantasy just because of his speed and everything like that.
Yeah. Okay. A couple of ones that I liked, Ricky Pearsall from Florida. Like you were mentioning McConkey earlier with his feet and route running and all that. Like Ricky Pearsall was that for me too. Like Dr. Smooth is what I called him. That dude was just smooth when he runs routes. I really liked him. I'm one of the only one. I don't want to say only ones, but I like Jalen McMillan over Jalen Polk. I don't know
Oh no,
how
I'm
you
with you
feel
on
about
that.
that.
No,
Okay,
no,
yeah,
100% with you.
yeah, because I thought McMillan was better. I don't know. I don't really have a comp, but I mean, there was a couple games. I was listening to a podcast yesterday. Thor Nystrom brought it up that when McMillan was out, obviously that's when Polk had his big games last year. But when McMillan came back, Polk was 0 for 0 in like 2 of those games.
Yeah.
So I know there's a lot of hype for Polk right now, but I personally like McMillan better. Who are some other ones? Oh, the other ones I want. So the two that we talk about in the discords a lot are Leggett and Malachi Corley. So I got to get your thoughts on both of those guys real quick.
So I'll start with Leggett because I actually wrote up his profile as well for our rookie guide and did a lot of a deep dive into him. So my concerns with Leggett is I think everybody's kind of fallen in love with him because of his size speed combination.
Yeah.
But what worries me with him is it's really only 1 year of production. He was a 5th-year player, I believe, at that point, or 4th year. So, like, he's already got the age. He's, 20 plus going up against 18, 19-year-olds. That's, you already have a leg up there, obviously, with his size as well, but really good contested catch ability. I think what I love about him is he is physical at the catch point, does a really good job with like body control, like using his body to box out defenders when the ball is in the area so that he's the only one getting it, but very limited route tree, very raw route runner, very inconsistent at running his routes, obviously lack of production. Like I think you're hoping that he just figured something out in that last year of college and that's going to transition into the NFL, but I am hesitant to think that happens because typically you don't see 1 year wonders in college end up being like great NFL players as well. So
yeah, the one that I kept going back to was Kevin White from West Virginia. His one year. That's I'm like, it scares the hell out of me. Yeah. And then Malachi Corley. It seems like the last couple of days I've seen him getting higher and higher on people's boards. I personally just too limited route tree, kind of like we were talking about with Leggett. Yeah. I can't buy into it.
No, I'm with you, and I can't for the life of me remember what who this wide receiver was. Back in the day when we were always in the Heisman chat talking about all these players, and I would always talk about like players who were like scheme dependent in college, and people would get excited about it because their production and they would test well or whatever. Like, oh, this dude's gonna just be amazing in the NFL. Yeah. And then it doesn't work out. That's Malachi Corley. Like he was running a very simplistic offense, manufactured production. Like they manufactured touches to him. Very bad route tree. I actually think not a very good. Like even as Xavier Leggett, really bad at attacking the ball. Like he's one of those guys like going on the comebacks. Like he'll get to where he thinks he needs to go, and he'll just like wait for the ball to get to him instead of attacking the ball and then turning him and using that speed and everything to be a yak threat. He does not do that, but obviously great top end speed, really good accelerator, like gets to top end speed quick, really good at making defenders miss. So like he's a fun player, but he's just so raw at the position. I would be surprised if he comes into the NFL. Like maybe after a couple of years, he's a guy like we see have a 2 or 3 year flash. It's like this wide receiver too because of that speed and everything. But I'm hesitant to think he's going to be a guy who does much because he's really raw as like a wide receiver in general.
Yeah, because people keep using the Debo comp, and he's not Debo. Like he can play a little bit like Debo, but he's not running the ball like Debo did. I think he had like 5 or 6 carries in his career rushing. So that's one that I don't like. Any other wide receivers you want to bring up?
I don't think so. I mean, I mentioned Aniyah Smith. He's one that, like I said, I'm high on that I think is going to go low. I mean, I think we talk Ladd McConkey. Nah, I mean Roman Wilson is kind of intriguing because of his speed as well, but like I don't know. Devontae Walker, who we talked
Yep.
about a little bit, but he tested slower than I expected, but like size and everything, like is an intriguing player. But no, I think the most of the more interesting guys we kind of hit on.
Yeah, one of the ones we didn't bring up was Troy Franklin. Do you think he's got a shot in the NFL to?
Yeah, I like Troy. He's very much I guess you could probably put him in like that Deshaun Jackson-esque type player as well, like just a great deep threat. Obviously, size, a little bit of a concern for him, especially with his frame as well. Was used deep a lot, but I think is a really good route runner, really good hands, a player who can be used. I want to say he was used in the slot and outside, but for the life of me, I can't remember if he actually was. But I mean, like the physicality was definitely an issue for him. Much like Xavier Worthy, I actually think his ball tracking was a little bit questionable at times.
Mhm.
Some of that, I think, was also Bo Nix and the way, like I said,
Nix,
he lofted things and didn't necessarily throw things with like on a line drive. But what I do love about him is just the way he uses his speed. Like he does a really good job of like lulling defenders to sleep and then using that burst to get by him. Like who I compare him to, and like not a sexy comp, but for those of you, for the initiated, the ones who really pay attention to fantasy football, remember this guy had a couple really good years. He reminds me a lot of like Darius Slayton. So I think that he could be that, but like more consistent.
Okay, I can see that. All right, we'll finish it up with only just one tight end, and we'll talk about any others that we like. But obviously, Brock Bowers is the tier one. I think everyone else is below that. Do you think Bowers is worthy of that top 10 overall pick? And do you think he's going to be like for fantasy? Is he a top 3 tight end as soon as he's on a team?
So top 10 NFL draft or top 10 fantasy pick?
Top 10 NFL draft, yeah.
Top 10 NFL seems rich, but he definitely has the athleticism. I mean, he's comp to, like, when it comes to, just athleticism, speed, all that, Vernon Davis, Kyle Pitts, like those are the guys in this category. So, like, I mean, you're talking about elite of elite. I do worry a little bit about I know he came in, I think, heavier. Like, he was it 240 something?
Yeah, let me see what old Dane Brugler has on him. He has him at 6'3", 243.
Okay, so 6'3", 243. I don't think he plays at 243. I think that was him coming in, doing the testing to get that, and then go. He plays more in like the 230 range, 235, which again, some people may say, okay, well, that's 5 to 13 pounds. That does make a difference when you're playing tight end, especially when you're asked to block, which I do think he struggles a little bit with. But like just as a pure offensive weapon, if he's in the right offense, he's going to be incredible. Like he reminds me a lot of, again, this is going to sound like a bad comp because he didn't produce, but to me, he's more Jonnu Smith than anything else. And if like those people who remember Jonnu Smith, like when Arthur Smith was using him the right way at Tennessee, like he was actually a really good tight end. And there were times like he was just killing it for you in fantasy. So if he goes to an offense that uses him, like the 49ers use Kittle, or trying to think of like, why am I blanking on his name right now? The Chiefs use Kelsey. Like the Chiefs don't use Kelsey as a blocker. They use him almost exclusively as a receiving weapon. If he can go to an offense that's going to use him that way, I think arguably top 3 is it's not unfair to say should be a top 3 tight end for you.
Yeah, because kind of like how Buffalo used Kincaid, he wasn't blocking this year. I'm hoping he could have like a Laporta type season. Obviously, Laporta just had one of the best rookie tight end seasons ever. But I think Bowers is right on line with those guys. So I agree with you. Any other kind of tight ends that you like in this draft?
Oh man, likes a strong word. Let's see here. I mean, obviously,
I like Ben Sinnott from Kansas State. I like him as like my tight end 3. Tanner McLaughlin from Arizona, I really, really like too. Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, Theo Johnson's a little bit interesting in just what he was able, doesn't have the production, but was like but was like a very good, just tight end, obviously coming from Penn State, athletic, tested well from Windsor, Canada. I think a Canadian guy, so like I'm rooting for him. Get us another Canadian in the league. But I think he could be interesting. The one for me though is Jatavian Sanders, Texas tight end, like incredible hands, really good route runner. Like I think really good after the catch as well. Like I think he moves very quickly from receiver to route runner, which is something we don't always see players do. They kind of catch it. It takes them a minute to go. Like he's very quick into transitioning into a yak threat. Very physical as well as a player. Can line up as a wide receiver as well, or in the slot. Doesn't have to just be a tight end. So like I think he's good there. The big thing obviously is doesn't really have the long speed like a Brock Bowers does. A little bit of a smaller wingspan as well. So like he doesn't have like the biggest catch radius, but like I think just a very fun overall player. Like I think he could be the George Kittle's not the comp I want to go for right there. I'm trying to think of like a good comp for him.
Jonnu was what I thought Sanders was.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that too.
Maybe a smaller version because Jonnu's like 6'6" or whatever.
Yeah, Jonnu's a massive human being.
Yeah. But yeah, that's definitely one. So I got to ask about the Ohio State guy. Obviously, Ohio State does not have a very successful track record of bringing tight ends in the NFL. But do you think Stover could be the best one of the bunch from, I don't know, the last 10 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, we saw him make some incredible catches at times, really good blocker as well. Some of that I think was definitely the injuries he was dealing with here toward the end of his career kind of hurt him a little bit. But I mean, I would not be surprised if he goes. What he reminds me of, and again, like I don't know that either one of these he had one great year in Eric Ebron. Like that's kind of what I see from Cade Stover. So like if he can stay consistent, I think he could be a probably top. I don't think it's unfair to say top 12 tight end. It's not hard to be a top 12 tight end in fantasy. It's really hard. Like those top 3 to 5 guys are what you really want, but like top 12 is not that hard. I think he could be if he ends up in the right place. And what I like about Stover though, as well, is like he's not afraid to like get his nose, like put his nose in, grind, be the blocker as well, which will get him on the field because he is a complete tight end. Where I feel like, the last one we saw of that, and my God, I can't remember his name now. I loved him coming out, went to the Jets, and for the life of me.
Is that Jeremy Ruckert?
Yeah, Ruckert. Like, Ruckert was the same way, but dealt with the injuries his entire career and, like, hasn't been able to get going. If Stover can stay healthy, I think, yes, he could be, like, probably the best tight end from Ohio State to go into the NFL and do stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, too. All right, we'll play America's favorite game, and then we'll get you out of here. I had this one teed up for you. Who is your favorite prospects for the 2025 draft that could be coming out next year that you can share with us? So if you want to do one at each position or just a couple, it don't matter.
2025. I mean, is it? Can I say Quinn Ewers? Like, any
of the juniors that could come out? You think if Shadir or whoever?
Quinn has failed me so much. I'd love to talk about Quinn Ewers. No, I'll do one at each position. Quarterback, I'll go with Connor Wigman. Quarterback at Texas A&M. Baseball player, can throw off platform, multiple different arm angles, incredibly strong arm. Really, the only knock I have on him is injuries. Like he's just gotten injured both the past 2 years and hasn't been able to stay healthy. But like the very small sample size we have of him has been incredible. He's looked really good. So he's a player I'm really excited about for the 2020. What is this? 2025 college football season. Yep. The 2025 college football season, especially because Texas A&M has an easy schedule as well, and they have a new offensive coordinator in Colin Klein, who we saw what he did with Will Howard at Kansas, who ended up now transferring over to Ohio, or Kansas State ends up transferring over to Ohio State. So we'll see what Will Howard does. But I think Connor Wigman also I'd put him in that Bo Nix, Drake May type rushing category as well. Like he can get you that 300 yards rushing. So Connor Wigman's the quarterback I'm looking forward to. Running back, I'm going to go with Quinshon Judkins, just transferred over to Ohio State. I mean, I've loved this kid. He was a 3-star in all the services. I was talking about him before he even committed to Ole Miss when I watched some of his high school tape. Like, I talked a little bit earlier about Raymond Davis as a receiver. Quinshawn is the same. Like, he lined up in the slot for his high school team and was running routes, catching the ball. Like, and they haven't even used him that way in college, but he's got that in his bag. Really good runner. Powerful runner, quick footwork for his size as well. They tracked him at 22 miles per hour. Now he's going to Ohio State. It's going to have that offensive line blocking for him and everything. Like, I think Judkin's stock could just shoot through the roof if he has a really good year. And I think it's going to help him that he's splitting the backfield with Travion as well. So he's not going to get beat up. He's not going to get that like 300 plus carries like he was getting at Ole Miss, because he's not the only running back in the room.
That was the one I was going to ask you about is at the end there is what do you think Henderson and Judkins are going to do together? Like, are we going to become Michigan and run the ball 40 times a game? Or?
I think so. I do not think Will Howard's good, personally.
Yeah,
I think that, and we've heard Ryan Day's talked a lot about it, right? They wanted to get more physical like Michigan has. And if you look at Chip Kelly, that is what he is. He's a run-first offense, and he's really good with those quarterbacks. That's why Will Howard makes sense, because he's a better rushing threat than a Devin Brown is. But yeah, I think that you could just realistically see like, I don't know, 15 to 23, 24 touches for Travion Henderson and probably 10 to 15 for Quinshawn every game. And it's going to be a mixture of like rushes and catches. And yeah, I think it's going to be heavy run game this year for Ohio State. I want to talk. I'll just briefly mention two of them, but like, I think the wide receiver group next year is going to be, they don't have the Marvin Harrison, but I think top three is going to rival the top three this year overall in Evan Stewart, Luther Burden, and Tetaroa McMillan. All three incredible. Evan Stewart, I think the best wide receiver in college football right now. Luther Burden is very much the, Debo type player, like just really good after catch, can be used all over the field, versatile weapon. But Tetaroa McMillan is the one that I'm most intrigued in. Just volleyball player, incredibly athletic, tall kid, very much in the Marvin Harrison type mold of like this profiles as an X wide receiver, just goes and gets the ball out of the air, throw it in his area code. He's going to go get it. Not much. He's actually more of a yak threat than Marvin Harrison is, but like not a massive part of his game. Obviously, you have to be a little bit concerned for those who may not be paying close attention to college football. He did get injured in the spring game. Haven't had reports if it was serious or not. Obviously, we're hoping that that's not true, because I'd love to see him play this year. But like those three, I think could be top 15 picks in the NFL draft next year, and all three legitimate have like wide receiver one upside. So those would be the three guys for 2025. And wide receiver, tight end, I don't think there's anybody that I can get excited about. Maybe Mason Taylor at LSU. Was it Jason Taylor's nephew, I think, is intriguing, but like he's not a complete tight end. He's almost exclusively just like an offensive weapon.
Yeah, and then Georgia picked up Urasek from Stanford, and then Oscar Delp's there too. So they have two more tight ends that could be coming along. That could be pretty good too.
Yeah. Urasek would be the one I think would be interesting, especially with what he's able to do. Really good blocker, but really good offensively. Like I think you could see him step in and be the Brock Bowers player for them this year in that offense.
And then I have to mention it, or Mike will fire me, but he loves Luke Lachey from Iowa. That's his guy.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Luke Lachey, I believe, is our top tight end in all of our rankings. Like, he is just a solid Iowa tight end. Like, that's what they do. I mentioned Wisconsin running backs. For me, it's Ohio State wide receivers, LSU wide receivers and defensive backs, and it's Iowa tight ends. So,
tight ends, yeah.
I don't think he's up there with like Laporta, Hawkinson, and Kittle, but I think he's like right below those guys. So I think could be a really good. He's complete tight end as well, so will be good in the NFL.
All right, sweet. Anything that you want to share with the audience before we get on out of here? Anything you're working on or doing anything?
No, I mean, we're completing our Devy guide. That'll drop on May 1st. So if you guys want to get a look at like the next coming classes, I think we did like 200 plus profiles this year. So we wrote up a lot. I wrote up 35 of them myself. So it's one of, can't say it's my favorite project. My favorite's a freshman supplemental guy because nobody does that. But
Yeah.
I love writing up the Devy guide just to kind of go through and look. If you want to look at our rookie guides, I know you mentioned you're a member. If you are a member of Campus to Canton, you do get that for free. We do it a little bit different than most people. We have actually our previous year write-ups, so you can see how our opinions may have changed on players over the years with 3 years worth of write-ups in there. And then outside of that, looking forward to being on with you guys on Friday for the draft coverage, probably talking who the Browns are taking at that point in time and everything, and just discussing the draft, seeing where some of these players go. So I'm excited for Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, I'm super excited for it. We're, gearing up for all 3 days there. Yeah, we got to wait till day 2 for the Browns to see what they're going to do there. The mock drafts have been interesting. I've seen Troy Franklin in round 2, and round 3 was Trey Benson. Like, if that happened, that would be pretty interesting. I think we could use some defensive helps too, but hey, who knows what's going to happen there. At Sports Fanatic MB on Twitter is Matt's Twitter handle, so you guys can follow him there. I am at Eric Vanek NFL on Twitter. You can follow me there, and at America's Game Pod as well on Twitter. But draft show coming up. Matt's going to be joining us on Friday. We'll be doing it all 3 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So come join us there on YouTube. Campus to Canton's doing one. Are you guys doing all 3 days as well?
I know for sure we're doing Thursday, Friday. I don't know that we'll, we're not quite as committed to the NFL game as you guys are to do Saturday. If there was a college draft going on, we might be doing that. But yeah.
Right. So check those guys out on Thursday and Friday as well. And many people hop between streams, so that's another good place to go check out is Campus to Canton. Like I said, you're doing anything Devy, that's the place to go for rankings, for news, all that kind of stuff. They have all kinds of articles that come out, newsletter that drops on Fridays that I'm subscribed to as well. So make sure you guys join all that stuff. They do great work over there. So, but with that, Matt, appreciate having you on it. Probably have you on again next year around this time, man. We'll do this again. This is kind of one of my favorite shows to do every year. So I was glad to get you back on, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to messing around with you guys again on Friday.
Yeah, for sure, man. So appreciate everybody for listening in. It's draft day. Let's go have some fun tonight and enjoy the draft. So, Matt, once again, appreciate you, man. And we'll see you guys next week for episode 40.